I'm Jody Heilbrunn. I'm the director of the National Center for School Engagement, and we've been hired by Goal Academy to produce a series of short webinars for you as parents of Goal Academy students. Today's webinar is called High School Degrees Pay Off Big Time. It turns out that everybody cares about whether your child graduates from high school or not, because on average, people who don't graduate from high school cost society more. They use more social services like food stamps and TANF, and they're more likely to make use of the public health care system. The really scary one is that they are more likely to be involved in the criminal justice system. And because they earn less money than high school graduates, they earn less in income, and then they pay less in income taxes. They don't buy as much, so they pay less in sales taxes, and their homes are smaller, or they don't own homes, so they pay less in property taxes. So everybody has an interest in the high school graduation rate in every community. But you especially care about your children. So usually when I talk about the benefits of high school graduation, I'm talking about the benefits to society in general. But today, I'm talking specifically about the benefits to your children. It's no big surprise. Our economy is changing. Perhaps you have a high school degree, or maybe you did not get your high school degree, and you may be just fine. I hope so. But the thing is, now there are many fewer jobs for people with a high school degree or less than there used to be in the past. I want to show you a chart from a report called The Economy Goes to College. It was produced by the Center on Education and the Workforce at Georgetown University. This shows the change in labor market requirements between 1967 and 2012. Now, I don't know what you were doing in 1967. My guess is that a good number of you were not even born yet. But in 1967, I was a little girl. I was 7 or 8 years old. I liked third grade, and I really liked going home and playing in the dirt. I was not in the labor market in 1967, but my parents were, and your parents may have been too. So in 1967, when our parents were in the labor force, if you look at the very bottom, if you look at the gray bars on the left of the chart, those are the years for 1967. And the very bottom bar that says less than high school, 38%, that shows that of all the jobs in the American economy in 1967, 38% of them were available to people who did not have a high school degree. The bar above it shows that an additional 37% of jobs were available to people who had a high school degree, but no more than that. That adds up to 75% of the jobs in the entire country were available to people who had a high school degree or less. Let's contrast that to today. The labor market that you and I are working in right now, that our children have not entered yet. Those are the blue lines. And you can see the bottom bar shows that now only 10% of all jobs in the American economy are open to people with less than a high school degree, and an additional 29% are open to people with a high school degree but no more. That adds up to 39%, compared to 75% from my parents' generation. That's a huge change. Let's move on. You've heard this, right? The more things change, the more they stay the same. Well, there is absolutely no reason to think that this is a pendulum, that things are going to go back to the way they used to be. They won't. This trend of fewer and fewer jobs available to people without high school degrees is only going to continue. So in 2012, that was 10% of jobs. What's it going to be like 10 years from now? It'll be even less than that. So it's incredibly important these days to get a high school degree. And in fact, to really be comfortable, you need more than that. This is a different way of looking at it. I love this chart because it shows on one page both the probability of getting full-time year-round work and the income that you can expect to earn from that work based on your level of education. Look at the very lowest dot. It's a blue dot. It says none to 8th grade. That represents people who have an 8th grade education or less, no high school at all. Well, your kids are in high school. They're already beyond that. So we don't need to think too much about that blue dot. Let's move up to the red dot just above it. 9th to 12th grade. That's where your kids are right now. So if they dropped out without a high school degree, along the bottom axis, you can see their chances of finding a full-time year-round job. And now, mind you, this was in 2008, so this was a few years ago. It's probably even harder now. You can see that in 2008, people without a high school education had less than a 40% chance of getting full-time year-round work. Looks like about 38% to me. And the rest, the majority, were probably putting together multiple part-time jobs or probably really suffering from long periods of unemployment and very stressful periods of unemployment. For that lucky 38% who had a year-round full-time job in 2008, they could assume to earn, look at the left-hand axis here, about $30,000 for their work. Now, let's jump up to people with high school graduates, that light green dot. The big change there is the probability of getting full-time year-round work. They have over a 50% chance. That's much better than the 38% chance of high school dropouts. And they also earn more money. If you kind of follow that invisible line over to the axis on the left, the income axis, you can see that high school graduates earned about $35,000 as compared to $30,000 for high school dropouts. Now, I also want you to look at the light blue dot that represents associate's degrees. That's just 2 years of college. And look at the big difference that makes compared to being a high school graduate. People with associate's degrees have about a 60% chance of getting full-time year-round work, and they earn over $40,000 a year. For people with bachelor's degrees, those are 4-year degrees, it looks even better. The master's degree, that's kind of strange to me. They have a lower probability of full-time employment than people with bachelor's degrees, and it actually matches that of associate's degrees. I suspect that it's because there's a matter of choice in there. They clearly earn more, and they may choose for various reasons to only work part-time. I'm not sure. The takeaway from that chart is that high school dropouts in 2008 had less than a 40% chance of finding full-time year-round work. That's really tough. High school graduates had more than a 50% chance. Much better, but still not very good. For those dropouts who did have full-time jobs, they earned an average of $30,000 a year, but graduates earned about $35,000 a year. That's almost 20% more, and I don't know about you, but I would love a 20% raise. Associate's degrees, they come with a 60% chance of finding full-time work and average incomes of over $40,000. So we've just talked about the economic implications, but education has incredible implications for health too. The following charts I'm going to show you come from Education Matters for Health, produced by the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation in 2009. On the surface of it, this chart looks a little scary because there are an awful lot of bars and an awful lot of numbers here. But the point is, it represents the results of a survey. And on this survey, one of the questions was how respondents rated their own health, whether they would describe their health as poor, fair, good, very good, or excellent. And the big message here is that those dark blue bars represent people with less than a high school degree, and the lightest bars represent people with the most education. They have college degrees. And the numbers here, what this is showing is the percent of respondents who rated their own health as being less than very good. So these are the folks represented here who did not think they had particularly good health. So what you want to see is really low numbers. So clearly, what you see for every racial and ethnic group surveyed, the highest numbers, the people with the greatest probability of saying that their health was less than very good are those who did not graduate from high school. The very highest number on the chart goes to Hispanic high school dropouts. 84% of them reported that their health is not very good. To me, health is the single greatest indicator of a happy life. It's hard to be happy if you're not in good health. Now, let's keep looking at the Hispanic bars there. Look at how Hispanics with college degrees responded. Just 41% of them indicated that their health was less than very good. That's less than half the rate of high school dropouts. If you compare high school dropouts to high school graduates, that in and of itself is a huge difference. While 84% of dropouts said their health was not so great, just 67% of high school graduates said their health was not so great. And these patterns hold for every racial and ethnic group. Even more serious, these differences translate to lifespan. People with more education actually live longer than people with less education. What this chart shows is life expectancy at age 25. So, for people who have survived to the age of 25, which means they did not die very young from a congenital illness, they didn't die young from an accident, they survived their adolescent risk-taking years, and they're 25 years old, settling down now. How many more years of life, on average, do they have to look forward to? Well, you can see that women live longer than men. So let's look at that dark blue bar toward the right of the chart that represents women with less than a high school degree. Once they get to be 25 years old, they have, on average, an additional 53.4 years to live. So their total expected lifespan would be 53.4 plus 25. So that's about 75 years, a little over 75 years. What I want to concentrate on, though, is the difference between the life expectancy of high school dropouts and high school graduates. The bright bar right next to it represents high school graduates. And you can see that at age 25, high school graduates can expect, on average, to live an additional 56.4 years. That's 3 years more than high school dropouts. What that says is that among women, high school graduates live 3 years longer than high school dropouts. And if we look at the chart for men, men who have reached age 25 and dropped out of high school have an additional average of 47.9 years to live, but graduates have an additional 50.6 years. So for men, that benefit of high school graduation yields an additional 2.5 years on their life. That may not sound like a lot to a kid because, after all, these people are living until their 70s, and for a teenager, that's just so infinitely far away they can't even begin to think about it. But think about yourself, think about your parents. As you approach the end of your life, the prospect of an additional 2 or 3 years is a really big deal. This is the scariest one to me. This is the probability of being institutionalized. Now, what that means is, for the most part, being in jail. There are other ways to be institutionalized. You can be in a mental institution, or, ironically, you can also be in a nursing home, but the vast majority of institutionalized people are in jail. And this shows the percent of the population by educational attainment level who were institutionalized between 1970 and 2010. Now, the biggest thing here that you notice right away is, wow, the rate has really increased. That blue line represents people who do not have high school degrees. The purple line represents people with high school degrees, but no more than that. And the green line represents people with college degrees. So overall, the rate of institutionalization has increased tremendously between 1970 and 2010. Most of that can be attributed to our tough on crime policies and rules like the California 3 strikes law. We've gotten much more likely to incarcerate people for crimes since 1970. But the interesting thing is that no matter what year you look at, the rate of institutionalization for high school dropouts is huge compared to the rate of high school graduates. That's the biggest difference there. Look, in 2010, high school graduates were institutionalized at just under 1.5%. But high school dropouts, over 4% of them were institutionalized. That's almost 3 times as much. That's a huge difference. And to me, a very scary difference. When you think about your children, the last thing in the world you want for them is for them to have difficulty with the criminal justice system and end up in prison. Now, I'm certainly not saying that your kids are bad kids and they're going to end up in prison. I'm just showing you what the data say. So all in all, what this presentation has shown you so far is that your kids will stand to earn much more money. They will have a much easier time finding a job. Their health will be better. They will live longer, and their probabilities of being institutionalized, which for the most part means in jail, will be much lower if they finish that high school degree. It's hugely important for them. But there's another aspect to this. Think about your grandchildren. Some of you may already have grandchildren, and many of you will have grandchildren in the future. What about them? How your kids do in their life economically has a huge effect on the well-being of your grandchildren. I just want to quickly show you a few points of information about the health of children by their parents' educational attainment. Okay, these are infant mortality rates, the saddest of sad, okay, by mother's education level. Now, these are not percents. That would be terrifying to think of, even a 4% infant mortality rate. That's not what it is. These are infant deaths per 100,000 live births. All right. So the dark blue year represents women who have less than a high school degree. So what the bar shows is that of every 100,000 babies that women with less than a high school degree give birth to, just over 8 of them are likely to die as infants in the first year of life. For women who have graduated from high school, that rate is a lot lower, actually, at 7.6. And it's lowest for women who have college degrees or more. In fact, the infant mortality rate among children of college-educated mothers is 4.2, which is just over half of the 8.1 that it is for high school dropouts. Think about that. That's a really big difference. And I suspect that it has a lot to do with knowledge of health behaviors and things like diet and access to healthcare. Even if things are not as dire as an infant mortality rate, for the vast, vast majority of children who survive, parents were more likely to rate their children's health as fair or poor if they themselves had dropped out of high school. So of the parents who dropped out of high school, they said that 4.4% of their children had fair or poor health, but respondents who had graduated from high school, that the bright blue bar, they said that just 2.4% of their children had fair or poor health. That's a big difference. 4.4% to 2.4%. That's almost twice. Not quite, but almost twice. So you see that your children's educational attainment is going to have an effect not just on their lives, but on the lives of their children. That wraps up our presentation today. Thank you for listening. You can look at our resources on schoolengagement.org. You can like us on Facebook, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.